The warning came too late. By the time the distress beacon from Meridian 4 reached the Galactic Union's Central Command, the planet was already dying. Sensors showed cities going dark one by one, like candles being snuffed out by an invisible hand. Then nothing. Just silence where 12 billion voices used to be. Commander Thel Nora of the Union Defense Fleet stared at the empty readings with all four of her eyes widened in disbelief. In 300 years of service, she had never seen anything like this. Planets didn't just vanish. Civilizations didn't simply stop existing between one heartbeat and the next, but Meridian 4 had. "Send reconnaissance drones immediately," she ordered, her voice steady despite the cold fear crawling up her spine. "I want full-spectrum analysis. Something killed that world and I need to know what." The drones arrived at Meridian 4 6 hours later. What they found would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. The planet's surface had been stripped clean. Not destroyed, stripped. Every building, every tree, every ocean had been peeled away like skin from fruit. What remained was a perfectly smooth sphere of exposed rock, still warm from whatever process had consumed it. The drones detected no radiation, no chemical residue, no evidence of conventional warfare, just absence. Pure, terrible absence. "By the ancestor stars," whispered Thel Nora's second officer, a young Vorath named Kessin. "What could do this?" The answer came 3 days later when the same thing happened to Corwin Station, a mining colony housing 40,000 souls. Then New Thessaly, then the agricultural worlds of the Deneb cluster. Each time the pattern was identical. A brief moment of panic, desperate calls for help, and then silence. The galaxy was being harvested. The council chambers, Union Central. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most tense gathering in recorded history. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive chamber, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and accusation. "We must mobilize the combined fleet," demanded Ambassador Kerr of the Zentari Dominion, slamming 3 of his manipulator appendages on his podium. "Every warship, every defense platform. We face extinction." "And send them where?" countered High Speaker Valora, her crystalline form pulsing with anxious blue light. "We don't even know what we're fighting. Our sensors can't track these things. They appear, they consume, they vanish. How do you fight shadows?" The debates raged for hours. Some called for evacuation of the outer colonies. Others demanded the construction of new superweapons. A few even suggested surrender, though they were quickly shouted down. It was the Archon of scientific research, an ancient AI named Logo 7, who finally offered a different perspective. "We are approaching this problem incorrectly." The AI's synthesized voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We assume we face a military threat. We assume conventional tactics will prevail, but our analysis suggests otherwise. These entities, we are calling them harvesters, operate on principles we barely understand. They phase between dimensions. They convert matter to energy with perfect efficiency. They show no signs of communication or negotiation." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the council chairwoman, Elder Morvath of the First Compact. "If our weapons are useless, if our shields mean nothing, what options remain?" Logos 7's holographic avatar flickered. "There is one species in our database with extensive experience in asymmetric warfare. One civilization that has survived impossible odds through adaptation and unconventional thinking. They are relatively new to the Union, dismissed by many as primitive despite their technological achievements." A holographic image appeared above the council floor. A blue and green world, third planet from a yellow star. "Earth," said Logo 7. "The humans." The chamber erupted in protest. Humans? The chaotic, emotional species who had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons before achieving spaceflight? The people whose idea of entertainment included voluntarily jumping from aircraft and engaging in ritualized physical combat? "They are barely civilized," protested Ambassador Kerr. "They've been in space for less than 2 centuries. What could they possibly offer?" "Perspective," replied Logo 7 simply. "Every species in this chamber evolved on what you would call a paradise world. Stable climates, abundant resources, gentle evolutionary pressures. But Earth is what xenobiologists classify as a Class 12 death world. Predators at every level of the ecosystem, weather patterns that can kill in minutes, geological instability, diseases that evolve faster than medical science can counter them. Humans didn't develop technology because they wanted to explore the stars. They developed it because their planet was actively trying to kill them every single day. Elder Morvath leaned forward, her ancient face thoughtful. You believe their experience with survival will translate to defeating the Harvesters? I believe, said Logo 7, that if any species in this galaxy knows how to fight when victory seems impossible, it is them. And I believe we no longer have the luxury of pride. The vote was close. Many species abstained. Some voted against out of principle or prejudice, but enough voted yes. The motion passed by the smallest of margins. The Galactic Union would ask the Deathworlders for help. Earth, Terran Defense Headquarters. Captain Mara Solon was in the middle of a training exercise when the priority alert came through. She had been putting her crew through orbital assault drills, the kind of high-G maneuvers that would turn most alien species into paste against their bulkheads. Humans had been doing them for decades. Captain, you need to see this, her communications officer Lieutenant Chen said, his voice unusually tight. It's from Union Central. Priority Alpha, they're asking for you specifically. Mara pulled her fighter into a smooth deceleration burn and queued up the message. As she listened to the briefing, the dead worlds, the unstoppable harvesters, the Council's desperation, her expression grew darker. They're scared, she said quietly when the message ended. Can you blame them? Chen replied. 17 worlds gone in 3 weeks. Mara, this is extinction-level stuff. I know. She took a deep breath, then keyed her comm to address her entire squadron. All units return to the Valkyrie. Training exercise is over. We have new orders, and they're about as bad as it gets. 20 minutes later, Mara stood in the briefing room of the UNS Valkyrie facing her assembled crew. They were young, most of them. The average age was 28. They came from every corner of Earth: Lagos, Tokyo, São Paulo, Moscow, Cairo. Different cultures, different languages, but all of them united by the same stubborn refusal to quit that had defined humanity since they first learned to throw rocks at predators. The Galactic Union needs our help, Mara began without preamble. Something is destroying their worlds, and they don't know how to stop it. They're asking us, specifically us, because apparently we're the crazy species that fights, back when any sane civilization would surrender. A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. I won't lie to you, Mara continued. This looks bad. Really bad. We're talking about an enemy that can strip a planet clean in hours. An enemy our sensors can barely track. An enemy that's already killed billions. She paused, meeting the eyes of her crew one by one. But here's what they don't understand about us. We're not brave because we're fearless. We're brave because we're terrified and we do it anyway. That's the human way. That's the Deathworlder way. So what's the plan, Captain? Asked Sergeant Park, her chief engineer and oldest friend. Mara smiled, a cold, determined smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to take a situation where we're completely outmatched, outgunned, and probably going to die, and we're going to get creative. The briefing room aboard the Union flagship Eternal Vigilance was packed with species Mara had only seen in databases. The Zentari with their multiple limbs and armored carapaces, the crystalline Velithi, who communicated through pulses of colored light, the gaseous Pharon floating in their containment suits, and scattered among them, looking almost comically small, were humans. Commander Thelnora initiated the holographic display, showing the Harvester's advancement through the galaxy. The red zones representing consumed worlds were spreading like a plague. They're heading for the core systems, Thelnora explained, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless standard. Current projections give us 4 months before they reach the capital worlds. Possibly less. What do we know about them? Mara asked, studying the tactical data with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. Logo 7's avatar materialized. Very little. They appear to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Our weapons pass through them or are absorbed without effect. They show no interest in communication. They simply harvest and move on. But they can be damaged, Mara said. It wasn't a question. Unknown. No weapon we've deployed has had any measurable impact. That's not what I asked. Mara pulled up a different dataset, the energy signatures from the harvested worlds. They're converting matter to energy, right? That means they're bound by thermodynamics. They have to process what they consume. That takes time, even if it's just seconds, and anything that takes time can be disrupted. The alien officers exchanged uncertain glances. One of the Zentari, Admiral Corvin, spoke up. Captain Solon, with respect, we have the finest scientific minds in the galaxy working on this problem. If there was a conventional solution— Good thing I'm not looking for a conventional solution, Mara interrupted. She manipulated the hologram, highlighting one particular system on the Harvester's projected path. This is the Crucible system. 7 planets, 3 asteroid belts, and a binary star that throws off enough radiation to fry unshielded electronics in minutes. No one lives there because it's basically a death trap. And this helps us how? Asked Commander Thelnora. Mara's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because to us it looks like home. We're going to make our stand here. We're going to turn the Crucible system into the biggest trap the galaxy has ever seen. The Crucible system, 2 weeks later. The preparation was unlike anything the Union forces had ever attempted. Under Mara's direction, human engineering crews worked alongside alien specialists to transform the Crucible system into a weapon. Sergeant Park stood on the hull of an asteroid, his mag boots keeping him anchored as solar winds screamed past. His team was installing what they were calling stellar mines, massive capacitors that would store the binary star's radiation and release it in focused bursts. This is insane, muttered Corporal Davies, checking the power readings. Even if this works, the radiation exposure will be brutal, Park finished. But that's why we're in rad suits and the Zentari are 3 systems away. They can't handle this environment, we can. That's the whole point. The human approach baffled their alien allies. Where Union tactics relied on overwhelming firepower and shield technology, the humans were building improvised weapons from asteroids and solar radiation. They were using the system's natural hostility as a defense mechanism. It's like they're thinking backwards. Thelnora confided to Logo 7 as they watched the preparations from orbit. No, the AI corrected. They're thinking like prey animals that became apex predators. Every human innovation is born from desperation and necessity. They don't have our resources, so they learn to make weapons from their environment. Lieutenant Chen and his team were tackling an even more audacious project, programming autonomous drones to mimic human brain patterns. The theory was that if the Harvesters targeted based on energy signatures, the drones might serve as decoys. It's never going to work, said Dr. Okonkwo, the Union's chief xenopsychologist, a tall woman from the Nigerian scientific colony. The patterns are too complex. It doesn't have to be perfect, Chen replied, adjusting the neural network parameters. It just has to be confusing. By seconds. In a fight like this, seconds matter. Mara spent her days coordinating with Union fleet commanders and her nights running simulations. Every scenario ended the same way. Massive casualties. But some scenarios ended with survival. Those were the ones she focused on. You should rest, Thelnora told her after finding Mara in the tactical center at 0300 hours. Your biology requires sleep. I'll sleep when we're not facing extinction, Mara replied without looking up. How are your people handling the stress? Not well. We're not built for this kind of uncertainty. Our species evolved for stable environments, predictable outcomes. This chaos, it's antithetical to everything we are. I know. Mara finally turned to face the alien commander. That's why you asked for us. Because chaos is where we thrive. It's not that we're fearless, we're just too stubborn to let fear stop us. The Harvesters arrived exactly when Logo 7 predicted they would. The Battle of Crucible. They came through a rupture in space, massive and incomprehensible. The sensors struggled to render them. They were there and not there simultaneously, existing in multiple dimensions at once. Hundreds of them, each one large enough to engulf a city. All units. This is Valkyrie Actual. Mara's voice cut through the command channel. Calm and clear despite the terror. Every sensor reading was screaming. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. Not because we think we'll win. Because giving up isn't in our vocabulary. All teams execute Operation Forgefire. Show these things what Deathworlders are made of. The battle began not with a thunderous assault but with what appeared to be a retreat. Human ships scattered across the system, leading the Harvesters deeper into the trap. The aliens watched in confusion as the human fleet broke formation, seemingly panicking. But Mara was counting, waiting, watching the Harvesters spread out, drawn toward the highest concentrations of biomatter, the decoy drones broadcasting human neural patterns. Now, she whispered. The stellar mines detonated in sequence, releasing stored radiation in focused streams. The effect was immediate and devastating. The harvesters, their dimensional shifting disrupted by the energy surge, became solid. Vulnerable. All batteries. Fire, Thelnora commanded, and the Union fleet opened up with everything they had. Weapons that had passed harmlessly through the harvesters minutes ago now tore into them, causing them to rupture and collapse. But there were so many. For every harvester destroyed, 2 more came through the dimensional breach. The human ships dove through radiation storms that would have killed any other crew, using the system's natural hostility as cover. Sergeant Park's team manually detonated their asteroid charges, turning rocks into kinetic missiles. Lieutenant Chen's drones swarmed the harvesters, confusing their targeting systems, and everywhere human voices echoed across the command channels, not in panic but in defiance. Keep pushing. Watch your 6, Valkyrie 3. They're falling back! Hit them again! The Crucible system became a maelstrom of fire, radiation, and twisted metal. Ships died. The casualty reports climbed. But for the first time since the harvesters had appeared, they weren't advancing unopposed. They were being fought. They were being hurt, and slowly, impossibly, they began to retreat. When the dimensional breach finally collapsed, leaving the system in smoking ruins, Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Casualty report, she said quietly. 43% casualties across all human units, Chen reported, his voice hollow. The Zentari Second Fleet took 80% losses. The Valithi light cruisers, they're gone, all of them. The price had been horrific. Thousands dead, ships reduced to debris, but they had done the impossible. They had stopped the harvesters. Captain, Thelnora's face appeared on the main screen. Blood, or what passed for blood in her species, stained her uniform. On behalf of the Galactic Union, We don't thank us yet, Mara interrupted gently. This was one battle. The war isn't over. No, Thelnora agreed. But now we know something we didn't before. Now we know they can bleed. The mood in the Galactic Council had shifted from desperation to something humanity recognized all too well. Dangerous hope. Mara stood before the assembled representatives, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Behind her, holographic displays showed the aftermath of Crucible, the destroyed harvesters, the defensive formations that had actually worked, the price paid in blood and metal. Captain Solon, Elder Morvath began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Your tactics at Crucible have given us our first victory against the harvesters. The Council wishes to expand human involvement in the defense effort. We propose creating a new rapid response force under your command. No, Mara said flatly. The chamber went silent. You didn't interrupt, the Council chairwoman. You certainly didn't refuse a direct proposal. Explain, Morvath said, her tone dangerous. With respect, Elder, you don't need human commanders telling your fleets what to do. What you need is to learn to think like us. To fight like us. Mara gestured to the holographic displays. At Crucible, we didn't win because we had better weapons or bigger ships. We won because we were willing to use the environment as a weapon, because we turned our weaknesses into advantages, because we fought dirty. The Union does not fight dirty, Ambassador Kerr protested. We maintain standards of warfare, rules of engagement, and those rules almost got you exterminated, Mara shot back. The harvesters don't care about your rules. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They just consume. If you want to survive, you need to stop fighting like civilized beings and start fighting like something that refuses to die. Logo 7's avatar flickered to life. Captain Solon proposes something unprecedented in Union history. Not human leadership, but human methodology. A philosophical shift in how we approach warfare. Exactly, Mara confirmed. We don't need to command your fleets. We need to teach your commanders to think differently, to be creative, to take risks, and we need to do it fast because the harvesters aren't going to give us time to be polite about it. The debate raged for hours. Conservative factions argued that adopting human military doctrine would erode the Union's ethical foundations. Progressive voices countered that ethics meant nothing if everyone was dead. In the end, pragmatism won. The Terran Vanguard was born, not as a command structure but as a training program. Human officers would embed with Union fleets, teaching their unconventional approaches. More importantly, mixed species crews would be formed combining human creativity with alien technological advantages. The training grounds 2 months later. The transformation was painful and often hilarious. Watching a Zentari admiral learn to improvise was like watching a computer try to paint abstract art. But slowly, painfully, it began to work. Commander Thel Nora found herself in a simulation designed by Sergeant Park, facing an impossible scenario, defending a colony with half her fleet destroyed and no hope of reinforcement. "There is no solution," she protested. "The logical choice is to evacuate." "There's always a solution," Park replied. "You just have to be willing to break the rules." "What assets do you have?" "Damaged ships, civilian transports, a Class 4 star with unstable fusion cycles." She stopped. "Wait, the star. Now you're thinking like a human," Park grinned. "How can you turn that liability into a weapon?" The Zentari began developing their own variations on human tactics. The Valithi, with their crystalline biology, learned to use themselves as focusing lenses for energy weapons. The Pharaon discovered they could survive in environments that would kill other species, turning them into perfect scouts for hostile systems. And everywhere, the humans pushed, prodded, and provoked their alien allies out of comfortable, logical thinking into the desperate creativity that had kept humanity alive on Earth. Lieutenant Chen ran workshops on psychological warfare, concepts that were alien to species that communicated through logic and mathematics. Dr. Okonkwo taught xenobiology classes focused on exploiting weaknesses, a discipline that made many Union members uncomfortable. "This feels wrong," Valora confided to Mara during a break in training. "Deception, misdirection, using an enemy's nature against them. Where we come from, these are not strategies, they are crimes." "I know," Mara said quietly, "but the harvesters aren't going to play fair. They're not going to give you time to be ethical. Sometimes survival means doing things that make you uncomfortable." "Is this what it was like on Earth, having to think this way constantly?" "Every day," Mara confirmed. "Our planet had megafauna that could swallow us whole. Diseases that could wipe out civilizations. Weather patterns that could kill thousands. We didn't become apex predators through strength. We did it through cunning. Through cooperation. Through refusing to accept that bigger, stronger, or faster meant better." The second wave, 4 months after Crucible. The harvesters returned, and this time they brought more. The dimensional breaches opened across a dozen systems simultaneously. But this time, the Union was ready. At the Corvin system, Zentari Admiral Corvin used human hit-and-run tactics, drawing harvesters into an asteroid field rigged with explosives. The harvesters fell for it, their pattern recognition not evolved for deception. At New Thessaly II, Commander Thel Nora pioneered what humans called the anvil strategy, letting harvesters believe they were winning, drawing them in deep, then crushing them between two fleets. Brutal, efficient, effective. At the Deneb cluster, a mixed human Valithi squadron turned a gas giant's atmosphere into a weapon, igniting the hydrogen-rich clouds just as harvesters phased into normal space. The resulting explosion was visible from 3 systems away. The casualties were still terrible. Worlds still fell. But the pattern had changed. The harvesters were no longer an unstoppable force. They were a solvable problem. Mara coordinated the defense from the Valkyrie, her ship jumping from system to system, always arriving where the fighting was thickest. She had lost weight, her face hollowed by stress and lack of sleep, but her eyes still burned with that stubborn human refusal to quit. "Captain, you need to rest." Logos 7's voice came through her neural implant. The AI had taken to monitoring her biometrics directly. "I'll rest when it's over. If you collapse from exhaustion, it may be over sooner than you'd like." She wanted to argue, but the AI was right. Reluctantly, she handed tactical command to Chen and headed for her quarters. She managed 4 hours of sleep before the alert woke her. Harvesters had breached near the human colony of New Sydney. The final stand, New Sydney. New Sydney was home to 18 million humans and 500,000 alien refugees. It was also, strategically speaking, the key to the inner colonies. If it fell, the core worlds would be exposed. The harvester force was the largest ever recorded, over 300 entities, enough to strip the planet in hours. Mara reached the system with every ship she could muster, but she knew immediately it wasn't enough. The numbers didn't work. The math was brutal and unforgiving. "All ships," she broadcast on all channels. "This is Captain Solon. We all know what we're looking at. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and probably not walking away from this. But there are 18 million people on that planet who are counting on us. So I'm going to ask you to do something that doesn't make sense. I'm going to ask you to be human for a while." She transmitted her tactical plan. It was insane. It required perfect timing, zero margin for error, and would likely kill everyone who attempted it. The alien commanders saw it immediately. "Captain," Thelnora said slowly, "this plan requires us to drop our shields during the attack run. We'll be completely exposed." "I know. The survival probability is less than 3%. "I know." There was a long pause. Then, one by one, the alien commanders began confirming their participation. Centauri, Velithi, Pharaon, species that had once valued logic and self-preservation above all else, now volunteering for a suicide mission because a human had taught them there were things worth dying for. The battle lasted 17 minutes. It was the most brutal 17 minutes in the Union's history. Ships dove straight into harvester formations, shields down, weapons blazing. They used themselves as kinetic weapons, ramming when their guns ran dry. Mara's Valkyrie led the charge, her voice echoing across all channels, calm and steady, even as her ship took hit after hit. "Hold the line. Just a little longer. Remember what we're fighting for. They want to break us. Don't let them." The human colony ships lifted off from New Sydney, packed beyond capacity with refugees. They needed just 10 more minutes to reach minimum safe distance. The Valkyrie's bridge was on fire. Half her crew was dead. The ship's AI was screaming warnings about structural integrity. Mara saw a harvester bearing down on an escape transport full of children. She didn't hesitate. The Valkyrie intercepted, taking the hit meant for the transport. The impact tore through the ship's hull like paper. Mara felt the air being sucked from her lungs, felt the terrible cold of space reaching for her. Her last thought was simple. They got away. That's enough. Aftermath. Mara woke up 3 weeks later in a medical facility, her body encased in a regeneration pod. Sergeant Park's face was the first thing she saw. "You're an idiot," he said, but he was crying. "Did we? New Sydney is safe. Everyone got out." "The harvesters," he swallowed hard. "They retreated. First time they've ever done that without being forced. Logo 7 thinks we broke something in their programming. Made them realize we're too expensive to harvest." Mara closed her eyes, letting the relief wash over her. "Casualties? High, but we're still here. And the Union?" Park's voice took on an odd tone. "Mara, you need to see this." He held up a data pad showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Monuments being erected, vigils being held, and everywhere the same symbol. A simple patch showing a blue-green world with the words Terran Vanguard underneath. "They're calling us heroes," Park said. "All of us. Human and alien alike. You started something, Captain. You taught them how to fight. But more than that, you taught them why to fight." Elder Morvath visited her recovery room personally. The ancient alien stood silently for a long moment, just watching Mara breathe. "The Council wishes me to convey their gratitude," she said finally, "and their apology." "Apology for what?" "For doubting you. For dismissing your species as primitive. For not understanding that civilization isn't measured by how comfortable you are, but by what you're willing to sacrifice for others." Morvath's eyes were sad and wise. "We thought we were advanced because we had eliminated war, but we had only eliminated the willingness to fight for what matters. You reminded us that some things are worth bleeding for." "We didn't do it alone," Mara said. "Your people learned. They adapted. That took courage too, perhaps, but it took you to show us courage was still necessary." Morvath turned to leave, then paused. "The harvesters will return eventually. They always do. But when they come back, they won't find the same galaxy they tried to harvest. They'll find one that knows how to fight back, one that learned from the Deathworlders." Epilogue 6 months later. The memorial on Union Central bore the names of every being who had died fighting the harvesters. Human names stood alongside Centauri, Velithi, Pharaon, and 100 other species. At the base of the monument, a simple inscription in every language of the Union. "They taught us to survive. We learned together how to live." Mara stood before it with her surviving crew, all of them in dress uniform. The ceremony was over, the speeches made, the honors awarded. Now it was just them and the names carved in stone. "What now, Captain?" Chen asked quietly. Mara looked up at the stars visible through the memorial's transparent dome. Out there, somewhere, the harvesters were regrouping, planning. The threat wasn't eliminated, just postponed.